Yeah.
pulling apart springs and,
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. All right. On that note, let's bounce right into the first meeting of 2023. So I would like to call to order the South Burlington City Council meeting of Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, Matt, you want to start us? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, instructions on exiting the building in case of emergency.
Sure. So for those of you in the room, there are doors on the left and right of the rear of the auditorium. You can go out either one and go to the doors on either side if there's an emergency. For those participating online, thank you for joining us. If you would like to speak during one of the agenda items, please feel free to turn on your camera and the chair will call on you, or you can message me in the chat and the chair will call on you. We are not monitoring the chat for content. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 3, agenda review. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in the order of agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move on to 4. Are there any comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda? Anyone in the audience? Okay, how about at home? I don't see anyone's light going on already. So we'll jump then to counselors' announcements and reports on committee assignments and the city manager's report. So Tim, do you want to start with the flying trampolines? Is that?
Nothing to report other than where I lived on Friday before Christmas. It was that windstorm did send 3 trampolines flying through the backyards. Luckily, no other animals, and I don't think any structures were hurt, including the trampolines. I think they disassembled, when they hit the ground. So other than that, a happy new year to everybody, and looking forward to 2023. Very hopeful about positive changes occurring within the city and also nationwide and hopefully worldwide. So there's that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Matt?
nothing, thank you.
Okay. Megan? No?
No, just wishing everybody a Happy New Year. And I hope that your hope is well justified. We can certainly wish for peace, right?
Right. Okay. Well, the good news is we don't have to have an election and have multiple rounds for leadership tonight.
We could do it, we could just promote.
Man, I feel for everyone in Washington. What a mess. So anyway, let's hope they can figure something out. City manager, I don't have anything to report other than I had a wonderful Christmas. I wish everyone a Happy New Year. And, if we could get some snow, maybe, I think 2023 might be a little better for our economy and more fun to traipse around in, especially the dog park. It's a little muddy right now, so I'd like about 1.5 feet of snow to cover everything. But other than that, let's hope for a wonderful 2023.
Great, thanks. So first and foremost, I'd like to officially on the record welcome Daisy Brayton to our team. Daisy joins us today as our new Human Resources Director, and she's going to say a few words to us. But just as she's coming up, she's got 25 years of human resources experience. Previously, she served as the Director of HR for Central Vermont Medical Center. Prior to that, worked for the city of Lincoln and Lancaster, where she built a lot of municipal expertise and also served in several HR-related positions at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I don't know anything about college football, but she was the HR person for the athletic department, so
Oh, wow.
maybe an interesting thing.
Yeah.
To talk Big Ten football.
Oh, yeah. It won't be me.
Is there a bright
Sorry.
green light there on your mic?
I know some people who would love to talk with you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Again, I'm Daisy Brayton, and I am literally 8 8 hours into the position, and I am so very excited to have come to the city of South Burlington, and am new to Vermont. I again spent most of the last 30 years in Nebraska, but my husband's family is in Essex Junction, and has actually some history with Burlington. So I am truly honored to bring my HR experience and to join Ms. Baker's team and the team here. Very excited to get to work with all of you and to meet you and collaborate with the future for the city of South Burlington. So thank you so much for having me, and I am very much looking forward to our relationship and collaborating together.
Welcome.
Any questions for me?
Well, thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Did you move here for the job?
I did not. I moved here to work for the Central Vermont Medical Center. Yes, but coming to the city of South Burlington, today I looked back on. I feel at home, spending most of my career in city government and academics. So very excited to be here. Thank you.
And she is looking for a home in Chittenden County. If anybody
Yes.
knows that.
Anyone know of I've lost 4 bids now, so
Oh, dear.
so definitely looking to find a home in closer, not Northfield. There we go. A pleasure to meet you all. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that is
Thank
a
you.
hall.
Great. So a few other quick updates. One in front of you, we did make you budget books for tonight in your discussion on the budget. So you have in there your roll-up budget, your line item budget, my presentation to you, and the enterprise fund budgets as well. So as we get into that tonight and in the next couple of weeks, you have that in front of you to look at. It's also posted online for those who are watching remotely. 2 quick things I want to call out on the consent agenda. One is we are asking you to appoint a building inspector, i.e. former chief and current deputy chief Terry Francis to that role. That is the requirement of your new heating ordinance. And then we are asking you also to allow us to apply for a grant for ash trees that would require a 2020 or a 50-50 match, 20,000 each from ARPA funds. So if you approve that, you will be approving that use of ARPA funds as well. And then we do have a few odd scheduling things coming up, so I just wanted to remind the council that our next meeting is Tuesday, January 17th, because it's Monday's the Martin Luther King holiday. And then we'll have another meeting the following Monday on the 23rd for the special meeting on the education impact fee public hearing, and then the steering committee meeting with the school board.
What day is that? I'm sorry.
That's Monday, the 23rd.
Yeah, where will the steering
Here,
committee?
oh, I'm sorry,
Here?
yes, here. Mhm.
In the auditorium, okay.
That's all I have, thank you.
All right, thank you. Moving on then to the consent agenda, we have 3 items. Consider and sign the disbursements, appoint Terry Francis as the building inspector, and approve a growing urban forest grant to fund the planting of new street trees.
So I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
Okay, is there any discussion? I just have a question. Have we agreed to the $20,000 from ARPA
No, we're doing
for
that
the
now.
ash? Or is this
So-
kind of contingent on that?
This would be, if we got this grant, we would be this vote would be to approve that amount.
The use of
the use
ARPA
of
money,
that.
okay, so,
The- And Dave Wheeler is here and can answer any questions for you on this, but the idea being when you had the first ARPA conversation with the committees, we heard an express interest to leverage these funds to leverage other funds, so this was a opportunity that was right in front of us and we wanted to take advantage of it.
okay,
But you have not yet allocated that.
all right. If there are no other questions, if you're ready for the vote, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The consent agenda is adopted. Item 7, the FY budget presentation from the police and dispatch service. So Sean Burke, is anyone else joining you or?
Just me tonight.
Just you tonight, okay. Can you handle it?
He needs a deputy, though. He's asking for one.
Yeah, yeah, he wants some help, that's right. Well, welcome. I hope you had a good holiday, you and your family. Oh, nice.
It's on. Excellent. And the manager is nice enough to drive the slide deck. Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to be here before you tonight to talk about the FY24 proposed budget. Guess we can go to the department overview and staffing. This is simply a wire chart of the organization as it's supposed to be staffed. So what you will see here, the blue boxes are positions or divisions that are completely staffed. Red signifies completely vacant positions, and the orange signifies other areas in the organization where we're covering or where we're carrying a number of vacancies. So how this really distills is that we've got 3 of us now doing the command function of the police department. When I first came on in 2018, there were 5 positions dedicated to this work. I feel as though, and I'll discuss this a little bit later on, that 4 is the right number, having 2 lieutenants and a deputy chief to assist the chief of police in administering the department. I think what's also important when we talk about the police department is we always think about people that wear this uniform. We actually are home to the Community Justice Center, which is a really fascinating place where we resolve a lot of crime and disorder for the community through a restorative process. That is staffed by the executive director in 2 part-time positions, fully funded through a grant, pass-through grant from the Department of Corrections. We're also home to a human trafficking case manager coordinator. That's another fully funded grant position that, and a person that does direct service and advocacy to those that are involved in commercial sex trade. And we see quite a bit of that across the state, pretty acutely here in South Burlington, with those wrestling with substance use disorder, seeing this as a means to feed that disorder. That again is another grant funded position. Our final grant funded position is actually one of our police officer positions, but with our relationship with the Vermont State Police Drug Task Force. So where we're currently carrying our vacancies are in sworn patrol officer spots. As you can see, the lieutenant that used to oversee the Bureau of Criminal Investigations, our traffic safety unit, and our youth service team, that position is vacant. Our youth service sergeant, Dennis Ward, who retired, that position is currently vacant. What those vacancies really create is a gap where we cannot do a lot of the programmatic community-based policing functions that we once did, neighborhood watch, the CSI camp, things like shopping with the kids at Target around Christmas time. We just don't have the bandwidth for that type of work, which is, it really cuts in a number of different ways. We also had to reassign our traffic safety officer back into patrol in 2022. And this community really feels the strain of the traffic woes here in town. A lot is due to the pass-through nature of South Burlington, but that's simply a position that we had to temporarily reassign. And then lastly, we had 2 SROs. That is now staffed with just 1, Corporal Williamson. So she covers the high school, the middle school, the 3 grammar schools, plus Rice Memorial. So she's spread quite thin in that role. And then I'll talk about this in a subsequent slide. The remainder of our sworn officer vacancies are carried in patrol.
So on this chart, those are all sworn officers?
Not all. So I should have
Case
highlighted.
manager probably isn't human trafficking case
Right.
manager?
So human trafficking case manager is not. The executive assistant to my office is not. Community Justice Center, CJC is the acronym, is not. In our records division, 2 employees there are not. In our dispatchers, which we do have a full complement of 7 now, those are civilian employees as well.
Thank you. Tom?
I should know this. What does BCI stand for?
Bureau of Criminal Investigation Detectives.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Some of our key successes in FY22 and then in the last few months, we successfully launched and implemented our body-worn camera technology program. This is really industry standard technology now, and it helps the organization in a number of ways when you think about preservation of digital evidence, capturing digital evidence at very chaotic scenes. It also behaves in a great training function in the sense that professional sports teams always use the opportunity to watch game day film, and this provides us that keen perspective. It's also very compelling evidence when litigating criminal prosecution, or if the city finds ourselves in litigation over a police action. And then lastly, it offers probably the greatest level of transparency that I've seen in my career in policing, in the sense that we can actually offer a perspective of any interaction between the police and the public. Very proud of how this program has taken off. And really, the success lies not only in city management recognizing that this was a critical need, your support of the program, but how well the team really embraced and uses this technology earnestly. So I would really tout that as our top success. We also fully implemented the statutory changes related to use of force standard in the state of Vermont. Pretty big undertaking when you think about the construct of the policy, the training of the policy, just the documents themselves, the new legal standards, and then how we had to adapt some of the physical techniques that we use in training in those environments. It was, again, a lot of work, but we had the right instructors at the right time to do it very well. And we're able to kind of have better visibility on our force records, our force applications, not only through body-worn camera technology, but we are now using the use of force reporting software that's embedded within our records management system. And that was of no cost to the taxpayer because that feature already existed in the system that we call Valcor.
Can I just ask a question? Is that kind of training now part of the training at the police academy? Or-
Recently featured on CAX.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so when our new recruits, or what do we call them? Is it recruit?
So
Our new officers
the most
get
contemporary
trained and
nomenclature is yes,
come?
officers. So,
Yes,
yeah.
okay. They will have that training, so it won't be quite as arduous an undertaking. It will, I mean, you always have to sort of train to your own culture, I guess, but
Definitely your own culture, your own operating landscape. But what was really critical about this is that the actual definition and use of force justification changed under state law. So we had to train to those standards.
right.
But again, great workforce, stepped up to the challenge, really adapted well, and quite proud of where we
Really,
are.
that's really good to hear.
Thank you. Thirdly, our commitment to fair and impartial policing. The state of Vermont requires that police departments train on an every other year cycle in fair and impartial policing. We do it every year. We have the luxury of Dr. Mercedes Avila, lives here in town, does our fair and impartial policing, or really what I like to say, our training or education around bias, inclusivity, and structural racism. And from our program really served as the bedrock to what the Vermont Criminal Justice Council adopted for the statewide training that was offered in 2022. So Dr. Avila ended up being the vendor that was selected to train all of Vermont law enforcement. So that work has been really fulsome and really beneficial to the officers, because finally in this really arena that can have a lot of controversy around it, we're offering education and getting buy-in from officers about systemic racism, about our own biases, and how we need to be extremely mindful in the decisions that we're making in our policing. We've also ordered 2 hybrid patrol vehicles. It'll be the first 2 in our fleet, given the supply chain issues and whatever the compound is in these batteries that seems to be really elusive. I don't know when these cars will be delivered, but we're looking forward to that action. And as I mentioned earlier, we finally filled our 7th full-time dispatch position. And I've spoken to you about this before. We really rely, from a public safety perspective, when you think about fire-based emergency medical service and police, we are still relying on a system that has one 911 call taker, dispatcher in our center for several hours of the day, and that is no longer tenable. This 7th position that we talked about after the pretty high-profile shooting incident at the University Mall is a great step in that direction, but I feel as though that it's probably the first step of several steps that we need in bringing up our dispatch staff to meet the service demands of public safety in South Burlington. Off the slide, I just wanted to mention we do have a new executive director at the at the CJC, the Community Justice Center, started with us late in FY 2022. His name is Joseph Lavanway. He grew up here in South Burlington, fantastic guy. We developed a new general order that went into effect July 1, where we refer directly to the CJC about 14 misdemeanor crimes to be resolved with a restorative practice, to totally take those off the burden of the docket and to actually test the data that has shown in other communities, other places in the country, that you can reduce recidivism by using a restorative practice. So that's really good work that we hope to report on more next year. And then of note, the organization to backfill a number of the key leadership positions that became vacant through retirement ran two fairly significant promotional processes in FY22 that involved a lot of stakeholders in the community, members at large, media exercises, law enforcement executives from not only within the organization but from neighboring organizations and city management, and more of an assessment center type promotional process. And I feel as though that we identified some great leaders for current times and for the time that the list will be valid in the event that we need to make future promotions. Next slide, please. Bless you. The resources requested from the police department in this budget really kind of focus on our personnel needs, trying to get all 40 of our positions to a level where they're fully funded through a two-step process, FY24 to 25. Key to that is to reinstate the deputy chief of police position by eliminating one lieutenant position. I think it's we're not the size or scale that's going to necessitate 3 lieutenants, a deputy chief, and a chief. I believe to adequately govern the police department, that a deputy chief of police position is critical when I think about succession. Although I'm fairly young, I feel as though I've got a number of years ahead of me. I mean, the time will come, and I think it's time that we have a little better succession planning within the organization, and a deputy chief of police position will be key to that. We've also asked for funding for 3 hybrid police cruisers. I've got data in a subsequent slide on why I think that's important. And then lastly, funding to transition our pistol platform. And I'll just give you a little bit of narrative around that now. We replace our pistols on about a 10-year cycle. Right now we're in an interesting spot where a number of years ago, the organization purchased a Glock 45 caliber pistol that's quite large. We can't put that gun in every new officer's hand just simply because of the size of it. It caused the organization to then buy a different Glock in a different caliber. So we've got a mixed fleet of these pistols out in circulation now. The ammunition for the 45 ACP and 40 caliber is pretty expensive. The FBI has done extensive research into what is the best caliber for law enforcement application. They identified a number of years ago that the 9mm is the best cartridge for law enforcement application, and that comes down to a few different things. One, in particular, the Glock 9mm is a size that we can put in virtually every single officer's hand. 2, it provides the organization to only have 1 pistol cartridge. God forbid that we needed to share ammunition in the field, we could do that. 3, the cost of 9mm ammunition is substantially lower than that of 45 ACP or 40 cal. And 2, or I should say lastly, Glock is an interesting partner with law enforcement in the sense of their trade-in program. We estimate that this pistol transition process would cost about $38,000. That's because you have to replace every gun, every holster, every mag pouch. But the trade-in value on our existing fleet of guns would be about $10,000. So out the door price would be about $28,000 for that project. Just want to talk a little bit about really the national trend that we've seen in law enforcement employment and applicant rates, and then how that really looks here. This graphic will show you 2018 to 2022, the number of resignations and retirements that we've experienced. And that's the orange line on the top, starting with 4, the peak being 6, and that 6 is actually reflective of the people that had resigned or retired as of July 1 of 2022. We have retired 2 others since this time. And then really our ability to find adequate police candidates has really cooled. This job used to be quite appealing to folks. For a lot of different reasons, America's wrestling with this inability to attract a lot of people to the workforce in general. Policing appears to be the last place that people want to come. The green line will show you the number of officers that we've actually been able to hire over this same time period. What I'd like to call out though is, although we still can barely scrape by, I mean, we slipped way back in 2022 with 6 retirements and only being able to hire 3. Our application rates are down 50%. In 2018, we would get between 50 and 60 applicants in a year's time, and in 21, 22, we're seeing exactly half that number. So if we can go to the next slide.
Pardon me?
Can I just
Oh,
ask a
yes, of
follow-up to
course.
that? Chief, and this is year on year, how long does it take to get a new officer up to speed where they can be alone in a cruiser and
That's a great question. Thank you. About 35 weeks. Yeah. So they do the first half at the Vermont Police Academy, and then they come back here for a field training experience. It's about 14 to 16 weeks.
Yeah. Okay.
Next slide, please. The attrition that was depicted in that last graphic in 2022 actually led to a watershed moment for South Burlington PD. We knew back in April that there was no way that we could sustain patrol operations with the number of officers that we had available for assignment. In April of 2018, we had anywhere, depending on injuries, because those come off the field and go on the field a little bit quicker than trying to spin up a new employee. But we had between 16 and 18 officers available for patrol. And we knew that on the 10-hour schedule that there was no way that we could sustain that. Labor was really fantastic through this process. We met, we talked about different options. It was quite apparent that we were going to have to pivot to a 12-hour schedule. It did a couple of things. One, by eliminating essentially the middle or evening shift, we were able to use those few officers that were left there on a day or night 12-hour rotation where they could have fixed days on, days off. Our workforce was really hungry for adequate work-life balance. We were able to work through this process, come to an MOU, and implement the 12-hour patrol schedule for May. And this was at a time when the Burlington police were, wrestling with their staffing situation, really reducing their ability to offer any mutual aid, really kind of seeing an uptick in the number of times that we were being called into Burlington. Coincidentally, it's also the same time when Shelburne PD went through a mass exodus in their town, and they simply just closed their police department after midnight and contracted with the Vermont State Police, which was fantastic, except for the Vermont State Police goes home at 2 a.m. So we were being pulled in a couple of different directions. Again, that the fact that our team stepped up, never really considered reducing hours of service and pivoted to this 12-hour schedule. It was the right decision at the right time, but it has some costs. Some of the younger employees enjoy the 12-hour schedule because they don't have daycare or school schedules to work around. Some of the parents, it's been a hardship, and we're working hard through our recruitment process to try to get our numbers back up so we can get the 21 officers that we need to function on the 10-hour patrol schedule up and running, and then have, again, a collaboration, a conversation about which schedule does labor want to use in patrol. To me, it's about them. They're getting the work done. If we've got the numbers to go to the 10-hour schedule, we should do that if that's the desire. If the desire is no, we like the 12-hour shift, we want to stay on this, I think that's a fine path forward as well. I just want to remark a little bit about where we're actually at today in terms of staffing. As of today, we have 20 officers available for patrol. That includes me, down to the newest recruits that you saw on social media and the like. We have 5 police officers as of next Monday. We'll have 5 police officers in training. 2 of those will be still in field training. 3 will be bound for the next academy class in Pittsford. And that leaves us with 5 vacancies, 2 of which are unfunded anyway. When you look at kind of national metrics around, police department staffing, we should really have 60% of our overall sworn populace of officers assigned to patrol. That would be 24 when we're staffed to 40 officers. When you look at some very basic formulas based on population on how big a police department should be, the FBI UCR formula would indicate that a city of 20,000 should have about 48 total sworn positions. What's a little interesting about that number is, one, it really doesn't speak to a city other than having 20,000 residents. You could have a very violent city of 20,000 residents that could need more than that. You could have a very quiet city of 20,000 residents, just the same. But I'm sorry, I totally lost what I was going to say. So I'll remember it in the next slide. It dovetails. Thank you.
Maybe you're comfortable with 40?
No. So
Just asking.
what I'm trying to say is that I don't want to, sell you on a generic metric, but what I do want to eventually conclude with is that the city has seen a lot of growth. And to think that we're not at a time where we need to start planning for that incremental growth in terms of the sworn officer resources would be extremely naive. But, in the end, I'll bring that together. I just want to talk about why the police department is requesting 3 patrol cars in FY24. As we've all been through this process together a few different times, one of the first things to be chopped off the block is that extra police car. I know that we did it in FY19, 20, and 21. Now we're starting to see some really substantial increases in our maintenance budget. You'll see in this graphic that our budgeted funds for our fleet maintenance have gone up over 13%, and we're still overspending that line quite frequently. A lot of these things can be attributed to a one-time occurrence, like if we keep a police car too long and we end up having to replace the motor, that's about a $5,000 unanticipated expense. And when I look at the peaks on this chart, that's what I recall. We're also starting to see the longer that we keep a police car in service, that we begin to lose them for issues related to corrosion. They simply rust out. So I think it's imperative that we receive the funding for the 3 patrol vehicles in FY24 to try to quell some of these costs, and also to better invest in the hybrid technology moving forward. Forever, law enforcement has bought a lot of adapters for police cars, idle management technology, where an officer needs to hit a button and then the police car is supposed to regulate itself, turn the motor on, turn the motor off as the emergency lights draw on the charging system. But the critical fail point is the officer has to remember to hit the button in amongst a lot of different things that an officer has going on. The technology is aftermarket. Sometimes it's not all that reliable. And that technology is exactly how a hybrid patrol vehicle would work. The minute the car is in park, if the emergency lights are running and the officer uses the radio and the idle needs to come on, the car will do it itself. If the car is just sitting there with the LED emergency lights illuminated, likely it won't idle. So I think that this hybrid technology is going to be really good, one for idle wear and tear, and hopefully more globally better for the environment.
So when an officer is parked, because I know you have to keep your car on and ready to go, you can't turn it off, would you have the lights going then?
So I think the best example is like when you sit at a crash scene and you're waiting for that roadway to be cleared, the emergency equipment's on, the officer's using his or her radio, that all draws on the battery. A hybrid car will sit there and run on the battery for quite a long time before it needs to idle up. The gasoline car is just running at 0 miles per gallon the entire time.
Okay.
What manufacturer are you using for the hybrid?
Ford is the only manufacturer that does a police-rated cruiser.
So, and what model is going to be that? Is it
The only thing that Ford makes, the only platform that Ford makes, it's they call it a utility, but it's an Explorer.
okay?
And are those available?
So That's a great question. So we ordered two. We hope to take delivery, but like every other supply chain issue, it appears that those are probably a year out.
Oh, really? A whole year out?
That's what it appears. Which again will have, a negative impact on our maintenance line as we try to keep our other cars in service.
Didn't someone run into one of our cars too? I mean, someone you were following or?
Yes, I remember that, yes.
We haven't completely lost a cruiser
Car, unlike
Yes.
Burlington, I think.
recently.
Yeah, okay, but we did have.
We did have
yeah,
a minor
someone,
collision,
yes, okay.
repairable.
Yes, but it digs into the repair budget.
Yes, absolutely.
In perhaps unexpected ways.
We can go to the next slide, please. Talk about some emerging issues. I know that we did a press release on some of this data more recently to try to get the public to help us out in ways of just hardening ourselves against these crimes of opportunity. But against this landscape of really having our human resources stretched incredibly thin, we're seeing really a shocking increase in the number of crime categories, and crime categories that take quite a bit of investigation. When I look at this slide, the chart on the left in FY22, where we're seeing incidents of larceny, which is theft of anything, at 545, that's an unprecedented number. 87 stolen vehicles, unprecedented number. And then 370 retail thefts is larger than usual, and also a crime that really cuts at the vitality of the city when you think about the commercial makeup of South Burlington. Some of our business partners have large margins, big corporations. Others have really small margins, small margins. And the crime of retail theft is really kind of shrugged off as it's not a big deal. Well, it's a big deal if you're trying to keep your lights on and feed your family. So, I think that I call this out because I don't want to make this political in any way, say it's a policy decision that's fueling this, or that the courts were closed too long, but simply it may not be that our system works all that great. And when I think about the number of crime categories that we're trying to do direct referrals to our community justice center, and really looking at the national data that suggests that you can reduce recidivism, I think that that's an area that the broader criminal justice system should really put more focus on, is using restorative process to try to resolve on the first time through the system crime and disorder, so the person that's responsible for that crime understands the profound impact they're having on the community and the person that they directly affected. When I think about some of the actors involved in these crimes, and having been around Chittenden County law enforcement for a while, I know they're totally exploiting the courts being closed, the fact that they know they're not going to get a trial, and they go out and they steal car after car, and they use that stolen car to commit a retail theft or a burglary to cloak their identity during those crimes. And that certainly is being exploited. And I don't think there's any easy answers here, but I will tell you that the officers, regardless of what the causation of this, still have to spend the amount of time to investigate these crimes, explain to the affected parties what's going on, why the system doesn't work, why the person was released. And it's a lot of work. And despite you look at our overall call volume, it's down a little bit. But when you look at where officers are spending a lot of their time, it's on these emerging crime trends. So again, the first chart on the left is crimes that I just simply said investigator required. The second chart with crimes against a person, we're talking about domestic violence incidents. Again, these take quite a bit of time. If you're going to go in and do an investigation into why a domestic quarrel is going on, our organization leads the state in lethality assessments that are done with survivors of domestic violence. We unearth a lot of historical assaults that occur in families and make those cases, and that's really meaningful work. Assaults in general are up, and those are investigations that take time. And also sex crimes were oddly up in FY21. And again, when you think about a variety of sex crimes, we know that they are simply underreported, that survivors are live in a lot of fear, have a lot of stigma around this. And when we get the opportunity to work with that populace, we really take it serious and invest the time. And we're still doing that despite our stretched human resources. But I think we're starting to really reach the end of our bandwidth operationally.
I would assume that on the right-hand side, crimes against persons, that our connection with Howard and the mental health component, it doesn't drive that number up. Does it make it an easier number to deal with?
So I've got a subsequent slide on our relationship and the value prospect of community outreach in Howard. Do we leverage those services across a lot of different crime categories? We do. But this slide was really kind of meant to highlight the amount of investigation required.
Okay. And then just one other question. In terms of the auto thefts, I know there were a considerable number at the airport parking garage. Now, there's Burlington Police there, and it is an area owned by Burlington. Is South Burlington Police responsible for doing that follow-up, or
No, Burlington takes
they
those
do that?
cases.
So those numbers don't reflect those car thefts?
That's correct.
Okay.
Are these vehicles being hotwired or people just leaving their keys in the car?
Yeah, generally the keys are in the car. And again, like this vehicle theft is not about there's no chop market. The car is not being, put in an offshore container and shipped. It's not about the car. A lot of times, the people that are responsible for these crimes, fairly small number of recidivists. They're using it, again, to commit retail thefts, do a burglary, any number of things where our best first lead is a stolen car. And we have to track that down first to then figure out who the actual perpetrators of the underlying crime are. A little silver lining in this cloud, though, is unfortunately we've learned that when we do recover these cars, they're in a variety of different status, and oftentimes riddled with evidence of drug use, needles, really need of cleaning service. We ended up working with an affected person that had their car stolen, shared their story, connected them with our community justice center, and now we have a resource guide that we can afford people that have their car stolen when they're reunited with it, in the event that they do need the car cleaned or guidance on how to navigate the insurance process. So again, being creative, using all the resources, and try to best serve the public.
So the moral of the story there is lock your cars when they're in your driveway or wherever you go and you leave your car, lock your car and take your keys. Right?
And your valuables.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So you talked about the small number of recidivists, and I was curious if you see more first-time offenders and kind of their age category. Are they married? Are they single? Are they parents? Are there any kind of trends that you've seen kind of be emerging trends over the last 2 or 3 years?
Pertaining to stolen cars?
Anything. Any
Yeah,
of
the
this.
demographics it's wildly across the board.
It's across the board.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think economics has anything to do with it?
I definitely, when I think, we do cases of stolen groceries, absolutely. I think economics are at play. I really think substance use disorder probably leads most categories when you think about the folks that we see as recidivists.
Thank you.
Tim? Oh, Tom, and then Tim?
I heard you say something that touched upon a conversation I had with a police officer, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, but I think you said something to the regard that you'd like to see more first-time offenders with other types of crimes get routed through the restorative justice program. So would that be like the burglary? And if you could expand upon that, and would that be with the South Burlington City Council, or does that require other changes?
Yeah, so great question. Chittenden County is one of the very few counties that actually allows for a direct referral. I don't think necessarily burglary is not on our list of direct referrals. We've got about 14 misdemeanors that we do direct referrals on. And I think that that's really where the initial value prospect is. We see quite a bit of recidivism when you think about a crime like retail theft or a chronic issue like unlawful trespass, or even low-level things involving young adults, disorderly conduct at the mall, those types of offenses. I really feel as though that the restorative process can offer insight to the responsible party to the negative impact that their impulsive decision had. And perhaps they'll reflect on that moving forward. Other places around the country that have studied implementation of restorative practice have seen a drop in recidivism. I think for the council to be focused on this one part. So our CJC is completely funded by the Department of Corrections, and we do a lot of what is called pre-charge work, people that don't become justice involved. The Department of Corrections is really hyper-focused on using restorative process to resolve probation and parole violations. That's great, except the person's already in the system. And I feel as though that if we use restorative practice early and often, that we could have fewer people on probation, fewer people on parole, fewer criminal records. And maybe that opens up other opportunities for those individuals moving forward. And I think that if the Department of Corrections begins to shift their funding away from pre-charge programs, that it would really be imperative that I come back here with Joseph and we begin to talk about municipal funding for our CJC. I really believe that strongly in the work.
So the line item is pre-charge justice? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, so we do direct referral on 14 misdemeanors.
Down, Tom. I mean, that's where it can happen. I was gonna ask the same question. Is it state dollars or federal dollars? And the only way that will change, unless we find the money locally, is for the state to recognize and more fully fund that as a viable way to change the upward projection of
I agree.
criminality.
If I could just add a couple of sentences to that, I think it is not only the state thinking about how to further fund pre-charge work at the CJC level locally. I think it's also having them focus on where we're having success in our population centers across the state to have local CJCs. We are one of the very only CJCs in the state where the CJC is embedded in the police department. So you have this partnership of service delivery where you have officers working with their teammates in CJC to identify those pre-charge cases and do that work. There's a lot of movement at DOC to think about how you lift up out of community and do things more at a regional level. They have a lot of pressure statewide to do that because they don't have the same police partnerships. But where it's working statewide, continue to allow DOC to continue to invest in those embedded CJC centers.
Okay, that's an important nuance, I think,
Yeah.
in terms of getting funding.
Certainly. Next slide. Thank you.
Tim, you had a question.
I know it's a budget discussion, so I don't want to go veer off too far, but have you seen that disturbing video out of Rutland where the shoplifter was confronted in the parking lot by
Yes.
some individuals? And have you folks seen it at all? I'll send it to you a link later, but it's really disturbing. The person shoplifting was confronted by some individuals, and I think you would agree they were assaulted by these individuals trying to take back the items that were stolen from.
You mean the shoplifter was
Yeah,
assaulted?
the shoplifter was assaulted by the individuals in the parking lot, and has your whole department seen that, and do they have an opinion about that, and any recommendations for individuals in the community?
Yeah, we don't support vigilantism,
Yeah.
and I
Oh,
think there's a
good.
lot.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry. There's a reason why you hired me. And I think that is a very troubling video. But we did have a bystander intervention recently at EMS here in town on a retail theft.
It's an interesting story.
Yeah, that one worked out. I think it all depends on who's involved and how cool they can keep their head. But we watched that Rutland video, and there's a lot to unpackage there.
Okay, thank you. Moving right along.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. I just wanted, these two graphics really indicate what happens when you become more of a reactive police department. And by virtue of our headcount, we are simply more of a reactive police department. The graphic on the left shows our basic behaviors when responding to a crime trend. And I like to use, if we have a rash of thefts from unlocked cars or locked cars in any given neighborhood, you will see an uptick of directed patrols, incidents that we measure where officers are in that affected neighborhood, patrolling, looking to either completely deter or detect the crime that's afoot. You can see that we increased kind of commensurate with what we saw in crime data trends up through FY24, our direct patrol response. and then a sharp decrease throughout FY22. And that's simply really emblematic of not having the officers available because of no downtime, because they're investigating all these other incidents to engage in this type of work. Similar, not as steep of a contrast. The orange line is an incident type that we call field contact. That's again when we're out in an area that we know we're experiencing some type of crime and disorder pattern, and we have reasonable suspicion to stop someone to investigate perhaps their involvement or their witness to those documented incidents, and you can see a pretty sharp decline in that category as well. And then finally on the right are our traffic operations. So the top blue line it shows the number of car stops the South Burlington Police were doing FY19 to FY22. You'll see a very, very sharp decrease in the number of car stops that the agency is doing. Really, it's related to three things. One, we haven't had an officer assigned to traffic safety. That would be that officer's only role, and that's a large number of those stops. Two, officers' availability that are just assigned to patrol simply isn't there. And then three is really the uncertainty around racial disparities and the outcomes in traffic policing. You know, as we're learning more about systemic racism, about our own biases, trying to understand traffic data, this is an area of enforcement that officers are a little leery of. They don't want to get it wrong. They want to do it right. And I believe that that's a contributing factor. You know, again, like I highlighted earlier on, South Burlington has a number of traffic issues. It's probably one of the leading complaints that I get on my voicemail or in my email from constituents. And, you know, it's something that enforcement does an okay job with. Better engineering, more education, I think has more impact. But one metric that I really like to try to keep an eye on, and I have done so since 2014 post-Ferguson, is where the intersect was going to occur between declining traffic stop numbers and increasing traffic crash numbers. And you can see on the right side of the graph that we actually met that intersection in FY22, where we're seeing an increase in the number of traffic crashes. Now, this data is not super clean yet. There's about 4 different categories of crashes that we take. You know, so I didn't have the time to distill out of this the number of parking lot crashes and other things that aren't even related to public highway, but it's an area that I want to continue to stay focused on, because if we start to see more serious injury or fatalities in the city, it's definitely going to be a time to adjust or prioritize traffic enforcement and then convey that to the public so the public can understand that as a legitimate police action with a tangible public safety goal.
Okay.
Right. Last two, spotlight. I wanted to call out our relationship and funding to the community outreach program. Our partners are at Howard. This is simply a program that we could not effectively police the city without their work. Their ability to intersect with either new clients or clients that simply slipped away from services, kind of wrap them up, get them a better treatment plan, stabilize them, better serve those neighbors, and free up police officers. That's absolute gold. What we haven't quite been able to distill yet are what exact calls community outreach should respond to directly without us. They've got a good handle on that. I think we are a little more protective than they are about the co-response. But again, when you think about our social service calls, and this is a bucket of calls that includes overdose, suicidal persons, mental health related calls, intoxication, and welfare checks, well over 1,000 each year. It's real work. That's priority work that we have to respond to. But community outreach really does a great service in our ability to at least respond quickly, assess the safety needs of that scene, get community outreach plugged in, and get the cops out of there when feasible. And also, I just wanted to thank you for your work on the encampment policy. I think it's going to be fantastic that in the instances where we have to use this, that we've got a compassionate plan that we can consistently follow with our encamped residents and try to move them towards transitional housing or another situation that suits their needs. And then lastly, this is just a simple collage of our team and the work that we do every day. And I think good policing is almost like a good umpire in baseball. If you have a good umpire in baseball, you really don't know they're there. They call balls and strikes. They make good calls on infield plays and outfield plays, and there's no controversy. And I feel as though that this police department, with the support of management, this council, and the community, we do a damn fine job of that. But where we see ourselves now in terms of our authorized strength, our funded positions, we need more. And we are in a tough spot in terms of the number of officers that we can actually hire. But we find ourselves now creeping up to a stage where we're getting closer with only 5 vacancies, and we just can't hit a spot where we stop hiring police officers because it takes so long to get them up and running once we experience our vacancies. I do look at our retirement projections. We're slated to likely retire about 2 officers in the next 3 fiscal years, and that doesn't really say anything about the number of officers that we see simply leave the profession. I see policing as a vocation, but it's also one that's becoming a little more similar to the military, where folks will come and serve 4, 5, 6 years, and then they'll remember that they minored in something in college and they decide to pursue that opportunity. And that's great for them, but it does little for us when you think about fostering employees that are going to become our next youth service officers, our criminal investigators and detectives, and our formal leadership team. And I think that this plan that the manager has put forward to get us back to a fully funded 40 positions through FY25 is fantastic. It's also going to be a period of time where the police department needs to do a true assessment on how big the police department should be and how we should plan for the future in a growing city. I will say there are times now when the Act 250 permits come into my email box about, can you adequately provide police service to this project? The question in my mind is, can we, especially with no definition of what police service is? Will we go to the 911 call? Yes. Will we be timely on every single other time that you call the police department if it's a non-priority issue? Likely not. So I think, it's incumbent on me to find, and the manager to find, a good metric in which to judge what the size of the police department needs to be, and then bring forward a plan on what that growth needs to look like over years, because these are expensive propositions. But our people are our most precious resources. What we pulled off in 2022 with running patrol with between 16 and 18 police officers, simply not sustainable. Everyone was really tired. They rolled up their sleeves, incredibly proud and thankful for the work that they did, but it's nothing that we can sustain. And, I look forward to getting those officers the relief that they need. And we do have some of that on the horizon. We have 3 new officers that are going to start with us next Monday. The other thing that's a little complicated about policing right now and dispatch is not only our ability to recruit and retain these officers, but it's what the market is doing in terms of salary. When I look at our competitors, the Vermont State Police, Burlington Police, Montpelier Police, their starting salaries for police officers and dispatch candidates are anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 greater than ours. And I don't know where that market is going to end. I don't know, where the ceiling is. But I know that by virtue of our South Burlington team, whether they're serving in dispatch or in the field as police officers, they are the finest, well-trained, well-experienced police officers that are going to be highly marketable, and I really want to keep them. So with that, I appreciate the tough decisions that you all have to make on behalf of the constituents. I thank you for this opportunity tonight, and I welcome any questions that you may have.
Are there any more questions? Yes.
What's the history? How long has it been since we had a deputy chief?
I was the last deputy chief in 2018.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Just thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
That was a great report. You do a great job.
Thank you.
Yep.
And all your men and women.
They do the real work.
Well, you all do it together and you set the, and the
Tone.
dog, yeah, you set the right tone, and I think that's a big help.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay, so next up is the fire and EMS presentation. Stephen Locke, Fire Chief, and you're going to have some help from Terry.
Good evening. Certainly wanted to bring the team, the leadership team. I think what is very important, especially as a new fire chief coming in, is to acknowledge and certainly the people that I rely on every day to run this fire department. And so our department relies on the captains and to manage the day-to-day operations. And they are behind me. So a little bit up, Captain DiTilio, Captain Crispin, and Captain Corbin are the three people that really run the operations. And obviously, Chief Francis, who has both been the fire chief and oversees our prevention division. But also excited, a lot of our partnerships couldn't be done without a strong relationship with our union. And also in the room is our incoming union president, Mark Haishi, who is a leader in the fire department and certainly a leader with our labor group, who is a true partner in everything we're looking to do to build out this department. So I think I am the last presentation, so you've got a pretty good handle on what the overview is going to look like. And so next slide, please. This is our staffing matrix, our organizational chart. And so if you look at shift 1, shift 2, and shift 3, those are our operational folks who work a 24-hour shift on, scheduled for 24 hours on, then for 48 hours off. And so that gives every third day, that they cycle through. And so that is each one of those shift captains runs that shift. They have a lieutenant and then 7 or 8 firefighters. And so we'll talk about what staffing is. So we currently have technically one vacant position. So that is what our staffing is, looking at the people who deliver the services every day in the street, the emergency services, and then our prevention division, who does yeoman's work with all the construction going on in this community, ensuring our buildings, public buildings, stay safe. Our three persons. Terry is a fire marshal, a fire inspector, and then electrical inspector. And they're with all the construction going on in this community, stay very, very busy. Next slide, please. I think it's interesting here to look at the call volume over the last 10 years. And if we just broke for calendar year 2022, 4,500 calls for service for the first time ever. And we're about 4,560 calls for service for the year. But we're projected to, exceed 4,600, almost 4,700 calls for fiscal year 23 with the same staffing that was on board in 2008. And so we have not seen an increase in our minimum staffing since 2008, yet we're running probably almost twice the call volume. And what is more troubling is just because the volume is going up is, about 20% of the time when they're on one call, another call comes in. And so that reduces your reliability factor, your ability to deliver services in a timely fashion. And so ultimately, we'll talk about this shortly, our call volume is going up year after year after year. There's an increased reliance on the 911 system. It's very similar to many of the same problems the police department's having, we're having. And so you are going to hear a very similar message from me that you heard from Chief Burke. Successes for 22 and 23 to date. It's a little difficult and a little surprising for me to say that the greatest success here is that we actually maintain minimum staffing 24/7 so far with the amount of overtime our staff have worked. And I know I've shown you charts before, and we're going to see some more. It is not sustainable. The quality of life for our people, it affects their home life. So a huge success is that we actually had people show up to work every day, or we held them over most days to maintain minimum staffing, but the staff stepped up and maintain minimum staffing 24/7 during a time when several of them were working instead of 24 hours on, 48 hours off, 48 hours on, 24 off. And that is not a sustainable model. We separated the fire chief duties from the fire marshal duties, and I can't tell you enough how there was no way Chief Francis could do both jobs. Just not, no matter how hard you try, you cannot do both those jobs. He is so busy in prevention. There's so much building going on in this community. There's no way you can do justice to both positions. And I thank him for trying really, really hard. But he is one of very few people that can do what he does in this, even in this state, in terms of the fire prevention and fire marshal duties and plans reviews of some really big projects. And we're extremely, and we are, and I am very grateful to have him as in the prevention division, ensuring that our buildings are safe.
If I can just add a quick sense about that, this is the success we had last year because of the additional funding the council put into the fire department budget for FY23 at the suggestion of the staff. So want to thank you also for enabling that bifurcation to happen, which is what's allowing us to see a lot of not only the growth, but I would argue a lot of what's keeping the team going as they work to meet just this minimum staffing.
Very well said. Also for the first time since the early 2000s, we supported incumbent personnel to go to paramedic training. So there had been times if we hired somebody that was in paramedic school, we may have released them from duty, but the city had not made any investment in our incumbent personnel to send them to paramedic training, which is the natural progression, the next step in delivering the highest level of pre-hospital care. And so we have three people currently in paramedic school, and very excited for them. We spent some dough to refurbish our 2012 ladder truck that had some pretty serious problems with it, and so that truck has made it back to Vermont, and now we're still waiting for it to pack into the fire station, but we are hopeful to see that back in the next couple of weeks and get that back in service after being gone for almost a year. And then we were able to replace an ambulance and a staff vehicle. But similar to the challenges Chief Burke mentioned, supply chain is affecting our ability to take delivery of units as well. Next slide, please. So budget proposal, a revenue, and so the blue bars are actuals and the green bars are budgeted, and you'll see, FY22 was really a turning point, and you'll see a pretty marked increase in revenues, and you're going to see us outperform our EMS revenues in FY23 as well, and most of that is almost twofold: increase in call volume, and then an increase in outsourcing our billing to a professional billing service who has the contacts and knows the system, how to seek the best reimbursement, and so what you're going to see, I suspect that we will, exceed our revenues to about $880,000 in FY23. And we project that to exceed over $900,000 in FY24. So really a nice transition to a professional service. That's what they do, and that certainly has helped us to increase our revenues. You also see a pretty marked increase in prevention revenues, and this slide, prevention revenues are extremely difficult to project, because the majority of that comes on new construction. And so FY22, almost $1 million of revenue on permit fees. Most of that are on two projects, Beta and OnLogic. So, which is a good thing. And in FY23, we'll probably exceed FY22 numbers because of the street out front. We're going to see a lot of Market Street come in for permitting in the next 30 days. And so we're already on track to do very well with prevention revenues. Only reason I tell you this, we budget a number for FY24. I can't control that number. That number is completely dependent on people submitting building construction applications. And so we can look historically, but that number is difficult. It's not one of those numbers that you can control. And so it is a best estimation of what the recent trend has been. But if the market downturns and they don't do as much new construction, then that number will go down. If we see if another big project, a beta or an on-logic come in, that number will go up. So understand that's permit fees drive that number a little bit out of our control and in our ability to manage. Although FY23, we're going to do really well. So what's in the FY24 budget that's significantly changed? You're going to see we really combined the fire and EMS budget into one. That has been, this is my third different budget system through, and all of those I've been lucky enough to combine them into one. They start broken out and with the best of intentions, but it starts to be very difficult to say where that expense really. Some are very clear, but other times it's not so easy. And when we've adopted and really supported a fire-based EMS model, I think it's easiest just to put repairs in repairs, whether it's an ambulance repair or a fire truck repair. Let's put it in the repair category. It's easier to budget. It's easier to track the entire expense of the organization. So you're going to see a combination of that. The big changes, though, really are probably things you're seeing in every department. Fuel cost, way different than fuel cost. We switched from a very outdated records management system that the team just implemented and went live with 2-3 days ago. That has a substantially higher annual maintenance cost. We had an extremely cheap system for a reason. It was outdated and not worth much. And it's tough in our business now to track good data without a good records management system. And so, and then there's an increase in funding in the future into a reserve fund to allow us to support one paramedic student per year to build really a system where we continually support our incumbent employees to go to paramedic training. So that's what's in there. So I take our capital improvement plan. The funding being appropriated is $400,000, and I just want to take a moment to walk you through what we are seeing. And this is over 2 slides. So $400,000 for fleet, another $30,000 to replace thermal imaging cameras, which will allow us to see through. I'm going to say see through smoke is the value of them. Firefighter safety, citizen safety, and so we have much outdated equipment, and this gets us on a replacement plan where we can replace a couple a year. I'm going to just go a little bit more on the next slide, but before I get there, I just want to. Our current fleet, we have 3 what we say fire engines: a truck that has pump and water, the 1 ladder truck, a rescue truck, which is a command vehicle, specialized, and 2 ambulances. Our goal is to replace a fire truck when it's 12 years old and an ambulance when it has a total of 9 years. Our goal is to get to a 3 ambulance rotation with no ambulance older than 9 years. So that's where we're headed. The next slide is my best effort to tell you how I believe we can do that and smooth those costs over several years versus if you look at that total funding annually, if we don't smooth them over several years, we end up with enormous costs that we can't afford one fiscal year. FY27, when we have to replace both a ladder and an engine, would be $2.5 million needed that 1 year. Whereas if we smooth these costs out over 10 years, it allows for a much more stable funding of our capital fleet. So our fleet is tired, and our fleet is also expensive. My first fire truck I bought as a fire chief was $308,000. My first ambulance was $135,000. I can't buy an ambulance now for $400,000, and a fire truck cost me $1 million. So the price of fire apparatus is expensive. And so what we're proposing in this plan is that we pay for ambulances and what is the other thing that's gone crazy in the market is that it takes 24 to 30 months to take delivery of an ambulance from the time you order it, and 30 to 36 months to take the fire truck to back in the door from the time you order it. So if I need a fire truck in 3 years, I have to place that order today. And what has never happened in my professional career is have councils approve purchases that far in advance. The market is driving that now, and we have to look at how we fund fire trucks and ambulances differently. And so what I propose to the manager is that we do this smoothing formula. We start putting away this amount of money a year, allows us to order an ambulance today that I need today, but I'm not even going to see it for 2 years. But if I wait to 2 years to collect the money, so we save up enough money in the savings account to actually pay for the truck, it'll be 4 years before I see the truck back in the station. My fleet won't survive. So what we're asking you to authorize is the concept where we bank money away every year, knowing that when we actually let me order the truck, and I need to order for 2027, I need to order that truck in 2025. For a fire truck I need in 2027, I need to order that in 2024. And so what we're asking you to do is to really authorize us to support a purchasing plan, and jump in, Mrs. Manager, wherever you need to help before I'm going off base of what I'm trying to explain, is to we're going to save our ambulances and purchase those outright, but move to a system where most people are doing now with fire apparatus, because they've become so expensive, of a lease purchase. And really what it is, you put a down payment on, then they finance the balance for a period of time up to 10 years. And it doesn't require voter approval. It's not like a bond. And currently the rate's about 5.5%. But again, that fire truck's a 9 to 10 year, 12-year investment. And with the base fire truck costing $1 million now, communities can no longer do it, most communities, the traditional way where you would pay for it all in one fiscal year. So I've said a lot there. And
Did you want to comment,
I'm happy.
Jesse?
Well, just I think the chief captured it well. I will say you've taken one important step, and finance has taken one important step in this direction to this smooth out plan. One is with the CIP reserve resolution that you previously passed that allows us to roll CIP dollars year to year. That's what is a significant part of what enables plans like this to happen, so you can start banking away CIP dollars for future big investments. The second is to start exploring these lease to purchase options, which is a tool that other municipalities use that could enable us to, this council essentially pre-approve a future council to buy a piece of equipment. And that is basically what you're doing by saying we're going to authorize the chief to start buying a fire truck years before it's taken possession of. So we are trying to put together the kind of administrative processes that will support a smoothing plan like this. It's again part of action you've previously taken citywide to really focus on how our capital improvement planning is embedded in how we are maintaining our systems and have a predictable incremental growth in our CIP general fund year to year. I think there are some questions though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Chief, you're buying $1 million truck. It's going to be delivered in 4 years. What are we putting down? How does this work with the fire truck market? What are we putting down now, and what are we putting down 4 years on delivery?
So it depends on the truck. So what I have kind of estimated is if we start saving away a little money, we don't have to put, you actually only have to put 10% down. So but I think we can get, for most of the fire trucks, some degree of down payment, pretty substantial down payment. Because I'm asking, kind of the way the chart's showing now, we're going to start saving some money this year for a truck we're buying in 2027. But that ladder truck will probably cost $1.7 million by then. So we may pay 30 or 40% down. It's really, if that answers your question.
So that is my question. Are we locking down a price today for a truck that we're buying 4 years from now?
Yes, we are.
So the sticker's 4 years is $1 million today, and when it takes delivery,
it's still $1 million. We're locking, when we lock a contract price in, we lock the contract price in.
good.
I have a question in terms of really looking even farther in the future. Within this almost 10-year scenario, the city's goals in terms of growth are density which is going up, many stories. And the effort certainly, or the conversation is, we need more and more housing. We also need more industry or businesses. So as we attempt to realize those goals, what kind of fleet do you need for, I don't know how many more 4 or 5 story buildings. I assume it's different equipment and maybe more firefighters for more taller buildings than if we were just suburban sprawl and just building 2-story single-family homes on quarter acres in every corner. So is that figured into this?
So it's kind of ironic that this plan actually goes the other direction. This plan eliminates a fire truck from our rotation. So we have currently 3 fire engines, a ladder truck, and 2 ambulances. I'm proposing that we drop to 2 fire engines, a ladder truck, and 3 ambulances. And some part of that is back many years ago, off-duty staff would come back and they would take a reserve truck to a call. Those days are gone, right? So when they're there, they're there. When they're off-duty, they're off-duty. It is become a system where when we need help, after a certain period of time, it comes from another community. Do I think eventually we will have to look at a different number of apparatus and a different style of apparatus? Yes, not necessarily for taller buildings. Our prevention division does a great job making sure they're all sprinkled, standpipes in the stairwell, alarm systems. Those buildings are well protected. We still have to have the capability and the capacity. We still need more firefighters. We still got to figure out a way to get 15 firefighters there within a given amount of time. But I think what changes is, can we find a way to have a small vehicle running as a med assist? Could you staff 2 people in a pickup truck doing the med assist as opposed to driving $1.5 million ladder truck? To me, that's the shift that we should be looking at is we need the people, we don't need the big trucks.
So, and that sounds very logical to me. I always find it a little puzzling at some of the senior housing, and it's clearly a medical emergency, and there's this huge truck along with the ambulance. But what about the staffing number? I mean, we're going to, what did you say?
Yeah, so I think I tackle that. That's going to come up in the next slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I think ultimately we would like because we need to start planning today for fire trucks and ambulances, and I think that's what this plan is trying to get to, where you feel comfortable in letting us do that.
Yeah, I feel very comfortable letting you do that, but I'm also interested in understanding the maybe it's the ratio of firefighters and EMTs to a 10% increase in our population, every year for the next.
And very similar to Chief Burke, there are simple metrics out there that I can say per 1,000 people. But what I can really say is we can't deliver. We're going to go to a slide that says we're not delivering services.
What we have
and
now.
That's the matrix. That's the most telling factor. So
Okay.
Part of resources requested in the 24 budget that have been supported by the manager is the plan to restore what I'm going to call the 30th firefighter position that was cut in 2019. There's a thing called a staffing factor, and I think I spoke about this before. If you take the amount of leave time we have in the department by the number of people and the number of hours we work per year, and with a minimum staffing of 8 firefighters on duty, we need 10 assigned to maintain 8 with a relatively low amount of overtime. We have 2 shifts of 10, 1 shift of 9. This proposal restores that 30th position. And as I said before, the quality of life of overtime with our people is I can't say enough good things about how they have done this, but it has come at a tremendous cost to their personal lives. And so, again, this is my chart. I think I've showed you before. Through November, we've almost hit we've gone through 6,000 hours now. We'll be on 12. We'll probably hit 12 or 13,000 hours of overtime before we end the fiscal year, with 79% of that being mandatory. I think the little chart off to the right tells one employee worked 478 hours of overtime during that time period. So between his own shift and overtime, 47% of the total time in those, if you took 24 hours a day times the 90 days or 120 days, that person was in the firehouse 47% of the time. 24 hour, and that becomes that is not quality of life. And then the person who worked 112 hours didn't start being able to counting towards minimum staffing and ability to work overtime. That's a new employee until mid-September. So between mid-September and end of November, that person worked 112, and that's 5.6 additional work weeks that you and I work. And understand, like, we work a 40-hour work week, they work a 56-hour work week. So their base is 800 hours more annually than what I work. So ultimately, what we're trying to do, my goal here is to get to a staffing where they can get back to working 24/48. Every once in a while, there's an overtime shift available, and somebody would like the extra dough. Right now, it's like, oh gosh, overtime tomorrow. Please make sure I'm not the next in rotation to have to get mandatory, because that's what's happening now. And your mandatory Christmas Day, your mandatory Christmas Eve, New Year's Day, and someone's, imagine your wife or your spouse or your husband not being able to come home and having to work that shift. That's really tough on the family environment. So that's what's in here. And so to the other question on resources needed and staffing is our ability to deliver services for our ambulances. Our ambulances are busy. Our ambulance is busy. I think when I left the station today, they were on about call number 10 since 8 o'clock this morning, and we had a mutual aid ambulance in the city 4 times today. By the time I left, we weren't able. So that was just today. And over the last 7 days, the average has been 3 times a day we couldn't handle a call. So if you look at these are medical counts. Our medical calls from FY13 through FY22, and you see a pretty substantial increase. But what is more disturbing to me is the number of times we've needed someone else's ambulance to come in and take those calls. And so now we're up to about 23% of the time when you call 911, you don't get a South Burlington ambulance. We can't handle the call. We're out on another event, and so. FY22, it was 723 times. We had service and ambulance come in. We went out of the city 29 times. That is not mutual. That's supplanting your service. And so that is, to me, that's problematic. And there's a bunch of times they clear the hospital to take another run. So they don't get their paperwork done. They drop off the patient and they say, we'll do our paperwork later. That's a medical record. That's staying in your file. But they're doing that 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 patients deep, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 hours later to get caught up. And so what this plan and what the budget includes is hiring 6 people to staff a second ambulance. It's a phased implementation for a January 1, 24 implementation. So we absorb half the cost in 24. FY24, we pick up the other half of it in FY25. There is offsetting revenue here factored into that. If this happens, year 1 we'll only pick up about 77,000 of new revenue, and that's primarily because if we start these new employees in January, by the time we're not operational until March, so it'll take us about 3 months to get spun up. So we really only that first year pick up about a quarter of what we perceive as what we could collect over our full fiscal year. what we're factoring in 25 is the creation of a deputy chief position. And when Chief Francis was brought in, he was initially brought in as both a deputy chief and the fire marshal. And that the work in that office keeps him busy. And plus, he and I are both on a different part of our career than some of our younger folks. And so while we do need to start planning for some succession planning. And so we are the only career department in the state does not have a dedicated deputy chief position, like in the operational field, this kind of world. We have a very flat, linear structure. And so for those purposes, we need that position to start managing kind of the consistency amongst the three shifts, a true second in command. We need someone to coordinate training amongst the shifts so that all three shifts are getting the same message. And then probably what the most is, we need policy development, and we need people. So in order to do that, you need administrative staff. And while my captains do as much administrative work as they can, when you're running 13 and 14 calls a day, because that's what they do out of Station 1, Station 2 is doing a bunch of calls as well. And then you're doing your incident reports for all that, plus you're trying to manage the training event and everything else that's going on. You don't have time to do the policy development and the grant writing and all the other things that we need our administrative support for doing. And so we're factoring that into FY25 request.
Quick question, is that the airport road fire?
It was. And I think what is important, and I briefly spoke with the manager about this today, that's Captain Detilio. So he in this case, initially we call him a company officer. And so he's managing that fire. He's giving orders to the incoming units. Typically he would have crew continuity. He'd have oversight of his crew. That should be his single crew, should be his responsibility. But because we don't have a shift commander, we don't have a dedicated resource to manage events, the captains are in this very uncomfortable spot of having to both manage a significant event and keep track of all their people individually. And so we need that is something else that will end up being addressed in the future. I've for most of my career, I've never had to have the challenges that my friends in public safety at the police department have. We have never had recruitment and retention issues in the fire service. Not something we've ever had to worry about. You post a firefighter position, you have a ton of applicants, like people wanted to work in the firehouse. That is not the case anymore. The first time in my career, we are struggling with the recruitment and retention, not just South Burlington, nationwide. So we we are certainly going to have to focus and find new ways to look at recruitment and retention. The traditional things that used to be and used to drive people to coming into our business are not there. The challenges that we're dealing with the mental health crisis and dealing with that call service that attacks us are just very different than what we're used to, and people don't want to do this job. So we're going to have to look at recruitment and retention very differently. We're going to have to look at leadership and administration. That includes not only at the shift level, the deputy chief, and then future succession planning. We certainly need to provide training opportunities for our captains, our lieutenants. We have extremely young department. I think I heard the number today, 9 people with less than a year. So that's a third of the department I'm doing my math, a third of my operational staff with less than a year on the job. That's an incredibly young department. We need to provide them some management and leadership training to prepare them to be company officers. Our fire stations need to be addressed. While Station 2 certainly has individual bunk rooms, we do not have accommodations for diversity. We sleep in common bunk rooms, and so we need to look at, I often use my analogy. I have I guess she's 24 now. But would I want my daughter sleeping in that firehouse? No, I would not. And so, it's just different. When I came on the job, everyone slept in a common bunk room, but it was a male. We are still a male dominated workforce. We have not made the accommodations we need to have a diverse workforce. Our windows and doors, if the wind blows, we have a tired building. And a long way of saying our infrastructure, both of our stations need some work. This is the first time in my career I've worked in a fire station that's not sprinkled.
I know, I saw
We
that, but
require every building to be sprinkled.
Except
We leave with dinner on the stove, and I know we have a trip that shuts the stove off, but nothing worse than a fire in a firehouse. And this is the first building I've ever been in that's as a fire chief. Even the 100-year-old buildings in Burlington were sprinkled. And to me, that's a problem. We require buildings to be, if they're renovated, to be sprinkled. Yet we're in a non-sprinkled building, and I think ultimately our buildings just need some TLC, some paint on the walls, some new carpet, a little bit of stuff to make it feel a little bit fresher, a little bit more like home. That is our home. When they're working 24 hours a day. The it's a kitchen. It's just like your own home, and our buildings are just really tired.
But you got new mattresses, right?
We do. We have, and I'll say this. Well, yeah, and it's a little bit sensitive only because yes, and thank you. I just haven't pulled the trigger on it because we're trying to figure out we're trying to figure out the sleeping problem. Like how do we put some barriers in? We had a female start today. So in 30 days or so, she's going to be on shift. I would like her not to have to sleep in a common bunk room in 30 days. And so we'll come up with facilities, we'll come up with something. But so a long way of saying, again, a young lady who is very passionate about this shouldn't have to worry about having to sleep in the same room as a bunch of men. Just that's that simple. I can't end this presentation without just the spotlight on the staff, both from our operational staff and our prevention staff, who, our prevention staff work with contractors every day, and you hear nothing but positive outcomes about them trying to find solutions to technical problems. How do you meet the code, but still meet it in a way that's not black and white? How can we work with the contractors? And I think we're so lucky to have our own electrical inspector that is very unique to South Burlington. And our customers know our people, and so they make sure our buildings are safe, but they work really hard to make sure to find common ground, to find alternatives. Is that what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, because we don't give variances, but we do find ways that because we don't want to vary from the code. But how can we give allowances to make that happen? And then to the staff working 24/7, 365 on a ton of mandatory overtime. And I'm sure there's complaints behind the scenes, but it never complain about it. Never complain about it to me, and that is remarkable. I've been on shift work before. I've had little kids when I was working on shift, and I know the toll it's taking on families, but it's not sustainable. And we're having a 18-year employee leave at the end of the month, and for sustainability reasons, he just had enough. It's a great job, but it's quality of life, and I'm sick of working. I'm sick of being tired all the time, and that's what he says, and they are, and they should be. So we have got to find a way to address the overtime. That is we will not survive another summer like we had of summer of 22. And so I know that we're for the first time we're at full staffing today. Unfortunately, by the end of the month we'll be down 1 to 2 positions, and then is what it is. We'll back the cycle. So I think that's it. But I can't end without saying thank you to my staff who have welcomed me and been very, very supportive of everything we're trying to do to get us where we need to be. Take any questions.
Are there any questions? Tim, I guess I have one, and that is when you look at the capital improvement plan. And now I understand you're going to get rid of eventually one of the engines, or not replace one of the old engines, and you're going to move toward, you know, maybe smaller pickup trucks or some other, where, is that in this plan, or are the price of those something that, since it's a truck, it's not $1 million truck, it's, I don't know, maybe a $60,000 truck, but that's,
So two things. One, we won't be able to move to the pickup model without additional people on top of the people we already have.
okay. So
But
that
our,
goes
but our,
hand in hand.
yeah,
Okay.
so, but our administrative fleet, our small vehicles are not factored into this.
Okay.
And I think we are, they're small enough that we can figure out a way at end of year monies. That's how, I mean, that's how often it's done, right? I hate to say that 50 or 60,000 is not that big of a deal, but in the ton of money we're talking,
A whole lot different than $1 million.
yeah, exactly. And so we find at the end of fiscal year how we can address those needs.
So that goes hand in hand with additional staffing beyond what you're requesting.
If we want to move, and I have not, like, if we want to move to that model, it would require us to have people on a separate vehicle. Cross staffing, because then you're out in a pickup when a structure fire comes in, and then I don't have a unit show up. And so,
Got it.
but
Okay.
I think the model more likely would be a peak hour unit. And I say peak, you know, we know our highest call demand, 8 to 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So you could move to a model phased in over several years where you did that, but not something I would even put on your radar now. It's not high enough priority. What is priority is getting the second ambulance, shift commanders, and deputy chief. Like at the end of the day, that's where this department needs to focus on.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to my team for being here.
And thank you all, team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And no calls while you were here.
Yeah,
That I know of.
that's right, yeah.
Crispin, were there any calls
Is
that
that a
you
record?
ignored?
No,
Usually when I'm around,
Oh, yeah.
usually when I'm around, there are no calls. Yeah,
You should go to the,
I know.
just hang out there.
okay. Moving on, and we're actually a little ahead of schedule, which is great. The council discussion of the overall budget.
So if I can do just a little table setting about this. So I have linked here on the agenda for those who are watching remotely or interested watching later, the website where all of our FY24 budget information is linked. You also have it in your budget books in front of you. So tonight we wanted to leave time on the agenda for you to have your own conversation about the budget as it's been presented. You've now heard from all of the department heads about what they're recommending. This is really your time to think and talk among each other about any scenarios you'd like us to cost out in the next 2 weeks and bring to you. At your next meeting, you will have your public hearing on the FY24 budget, and you will need to vote whatever you want to bring forward to the voters. So if you would like us to look at, well, what does this look like if we do X, or what does this look like if we do Y, it would be helpful to know that tonight, so we're not doing math on the fly on the 17th. Or you can motion to approve as presented. Nobody laughed at that.
I'll start.
Okay.
I am prepared to support the 5.75% increase. I have heard tipping point, either those words or words that equate to that meaning throughout the last few weeks. And I think that 5.75 is very reasonable, given that we are there in terms of needing to meet the needs of our growing population, our COLA and inflation, as well as our CIP, which I think has been underfunded over the past at least decade. So that's where I am.
I'm there too.
There it goes.
Darn it, see?
Yeah.
They get too far away from me.
What page is that 5% on, just to?
Yeah.
13. Is it?
It is 62 in our packet.
Page 15 in that, oh, wait.
Oh,
62, 62.
She's looking at the PDF of the agenda.
Right.
If you go to, you are also on the PDF of the agenda. Do you have that in front of you,
and
Martha?
what page, 62?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
on page 13 in this
book.
Page 13.
13, yeah.
Or it's number 13 on the presentation in our,
Question.
This is the middle,
Yes.
middle choice, right?
So related to this, I'm generally in the same ballpark as where Councilor Emery just stated she was, but could you explain to me a slide on PDF number 60, but slide 11? So what is 1, 2, and 3? Are they mutually exclusive? Do they build upon themselves? I understand that Councilor Emery supports number 2, proposed capacity building budget. I'm not quite following what item 3 is, proposed funding to implement the climate action plan. Would that 2.13% or whatever it is be on top of the 5 point? Could you explain that a little bit more?
Yes. So I think Councillor Chittenden is looking at my initial budget PowerPoint budget presentation, the document that looks like this. The slide 11 on that overview in your budget book, your hard copy budget book. Yes, that's how we've laid it out. So we gave you, if we want baseline 1, the proposed baseline budget is if we just continue to do exactly what we're doing today, no ads, just keep up with contractual increases, gas increases, et cetera. That's the next slide you see. That's our baseline budget. Our proposed capacity budget includes the baseline and the ads that you've heard, the operational ads that you've heard from the department heads. So if you look at that slide 13, that 5.75 is both the baseline and the capacity budget. What that 5.75 does not include is the third bucket, which is the bucket to fund the implementation of the climate action plan over 3 years. That's on slide 14. So if you wanted to do that all in, capacity plus climate action, you're talking about the 5.75 plus the 2.13% for a total of 7.89% or 3.5 pennies.
Another follow-up?
yeah.
So in the
That's what you were asking, right?
It was.
Okay.
That is very helpful. So on the capacity building, could you clarify the new positions that includes? That would be restoring the firefighter position that they just that would be talking about the deputy chief for the police, the deputy chief for the firefighter, and the 6 new ambulance? No. Which
No.
positions are in the capacity building?
So if you look at the slide 13, the chart with a blue heading, and you look down the FY24 column, it is a 2-year proposal, so it does require additional investment in 24 and 25. So in 24, you're talking about adding the parks maintenance FTE, the deputy chief in the police department, restoring one of the police officers, the 30th firefighter, and the mid-year startup of a second ambulance.
All right. Then I support the proposed capacity building budget too.
And the startup, the stand-up second ambulance, does that include any of the people?
Yes.
Yes, that includes the 6 people.
So that's 6 months of the
Of
6
6
people,
people. Okay.
and additional things, net the new revenue. So we also have projected new revenue associated, that's the $70,000-ish, that will come as in the last quarter of FY24 as they're able to perform.
And
Go ahead.
the parks maintenance full-time equivalent, is that restoring a position or is that additive?
That is a new position.
Okay.
I want to use ARPA money for it. Yeah. Sorry,
We've tried to stay
I
at
think that's
3%,
to state.
you know, in
Well, I would
past
stay, 'cause
budgets.
that-
Yeah.
But there are a lot of things that are needed by services that they've been doing without. And we need to fulfill that request, I think. And inflation is running rampant. It's having an awful effect. And I think it's starting to cascade up through taxation at this point. And I don't think we really have a choice if we want to keep providing services at the level that we've had and not wear out those services beyond their capacity. So
Right. Well, I think if we don't do some of
Yeah.
these investments in personnel and police and
Yeah.
fire, we'll lose more people.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the impact will really be felt.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's really hard to catch up. I would just say that for next year, I will tell you now, I'm looking to fund the climate action plan with ARPA dollars.
That's 2 of us.
And then in subsequent years, I think we need to look at general fund dollars, because I think that's
Yeah.
really important, and I think that's a public expectation as well. I don't think we can just say, thanks for the action plan, and we'll do a one-time funding of work and then
Yeah.
call it a day.
Yeah, and actually, just to build off of you, Helen, if you're done.
Sure.
Is for the fiscal year 25 and the fiscal year 26 for the climate action plan, how we added 3 employees to recoup the employees that we lost over the COVID furloughs, that we would actually partially fund fiscal year 25 and fiscal year 26 through December of 26 with
With
ARPA.
ARPA funds.
Yeah, just to smooth it, just like, we've been.
Yeah, I think this
I think it's a
smoothing
good
part
strategy.
helps. Tom?
So I want to preface this again by saying I'm not advocating for it, but I would love to hear the city manager's reaction to, since this is the highest budget we will be putting forward to the voters in my 8 years on this council, and I'm ready to support it. When we had another high one, we cut into the City Center Reserve Fund. What is your reaction again to lowering that from 800 to 700,000 just to soften the blow this coming budgetary cycle?
Yeah, so we did, and I believe Alana is actually online to talk about that as well tonight. We did talk about that as a team. That is an option for us to consider. Our biggest hesitancy about doing this fiscal year is for that $100,000 gap, which is 0.5%. Is that it is still a hole we would need to climb out of in the future. We don't think it's possible to fund it $700,000 this year and for the rest of the life of the TIF. I think we would need to grow back out of that to regain the $800,000 investment in the future years at a minimum, depending on how we saw growth not in these blocks move forward. And so when we think about smoothing things out, that seemed to us initially that was we could do it now to solve a problem. It is creating a problem in the future. Alana or Martha, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you've covered it all.
But
I would not support that this year.
I agree.
I think
I
we
gotta
need that.
preface it by saying I wasn't advocating.
no, I mean, it's
I understand that, I'm just saying.
Knowing the speaking
I'm-
points are good.
the TIF should be generating enough revenue, and we've seen those spreadsheets before, right? I mean, there's probably going to be some point in a couple of years where we go, oh, we don't need it as much anymore,
Right.
so we could reduce that, right? But if you're saying that right now, it's a better idea to not reduce it, right? Just to have that buffer.
Yep.
I understand that because you're waiting for things to be built, and
And we're at the again, Alana, jump in here, but I think what we feel is that the TIF is performing really well, and we're seeing huge investment in the vacant land. The TIF needs some of the built-out properties to also redevelop. So what we'd really love to see is some of that change start to occur in order to feel comfortable that we can start stepping down that amount.
what do you mean built out? I didn't understand
Like the
that.
Blue Mall.
So existing structures be redeveloped.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, yeah. Okay.
Any other comments?
It's a lot of good work.
It's incredibly.
I hope
good
they
work.
can find the people to hire. I really wish they would. I mean, and I know that everybody's competing. The National Guard, the Guard is Air Guard's right. They're competing for people, and fire and public safety. But if you get in the high schools as soon as possible and start ringing the bell and advertising those careers, I mean, it'd be great to. And I'm sure they are, right?
One
I
of
know
our
I know they're trying, but I mean, that's
Well,
where
it sounds like they might need a little more administrative support in order to do that.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure both the police chief and the fire chief say, yes, that's a logical place to go for the next generation. But you look around and who's going to do that? Who's going to plan that? Who's going to carry it out? So
Chief Burke, am I right in thinking that one of our officers who we're swearing in next Monday is a South Burlington High School grad that we recruited,
Oh,
that
wow.
Officer Grealis recruited out? Yeah.
Oh,
Great.
wow.
You know, so I had to take my son to Saratoga Springs last week so he could meet his girlfriend's family halfway, and he could go back with them. And anyway, so I walked around Saratoga Springs, and I'm getting to a story here. They're building this huge, 8-story steel building, and I'm watching a steel worker walk along a girder, and then another construction worker walks towards me, and I started talking to him about it, and it turns out he's a plumber. And I'm like going, and it's like, well, how did you get to be a plumber in this construction business, right? And he goes, well, I went, I studied environmental science for 4 years, and I came out of that, and my whole family were plumbers, and they just kept beating me in the head, and finally I turned to plumbing. He goes, personally, he goes, I feel like there's a stigma, I guess. And I go, no, there's no stigma, because plumbing is a great business to be in. He goes, but this is great. I'm doing something that I love to do. It's a needed service, and I'm making a ton of money. I'm like going, you need to go to schools and tell people how much money you're making. You know, it's a union job, and you enjoy it, and you get to work in this, really cool construction environment. And so
Right.
it was a really great conversation to have with him. It was, anyway.
So any other comments? Other than really nice job,
Yeah.
and
Well,
thank you.
nice
I
job to the
think
team.
everyone has really pitched in and provided us the materials that we needed to, in some ways, make a leap, to ask the voters for a pretty significant increase. But I think you've given us and them the information that's important to understand the importance of supporting this kind of increase. And the city's growing, and we need to grow with it. That's kind of the reality in my mind.
Well, Martha?
Yeah, during the last council meeting, DPW budget presentation, the council recommended looking at the Spear Street CIP project. That has been looked into, and the CIP is updated on the city's website. There is a new slide with today's date. That is the updated CIP, reflecting the updated CIP project is Spear Street.
Okay, thank you.
Bob Britt should be here.
Yeah, where's Bob Britt? He needs to see that. Okay. All right, so
Great.
I guess no one wants you to do any more number crunching. Phew.
We'll
I
free
think
up
it's
some of
important that
Martha's
we
time.
all are locked and loaded with the reasons this budget is bigger. So when we talk to constituents, we enumerate exactly what all of the things are, and we can just quantify them outright. They need more police officers, they need more the fire department's overworked, right? We have equipment concerns, equipment renewal. I mean, it's all there in black and white, so.
Yeah, and it goes through all the other departments too, it's not, we just happen to have on the tips of our tongue what's needed in police and
And public works, and
fire,
public
but,
works.
there's other parks and highway and all sorts of,
We will put together a high-level summary of that for you for the 17th. And, thanks to Martha for all the behind-the-scenes work she did to pull together hundreds of line items with our department
yes,
heads.
indeed. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would encourage the public to look at these materials and then ask us if you have, call us with questions or pepper Jesse or somebody. All right, moving on. Did you want to just take a quick break? Are you
Yep.
okay? I don't know what time it is. It's only 8:30. You want to do one more thing?
Sure.
Okay, so why don't we move on to item 10? Discuss regulating heating systems in existing residential and commercial properties and possible direction to staff.
Bob Britt just
Oh.
joined. You
Hi,
want
Bob.
to make the happy announcement to Bob or Martha or? Bob, the bike lane on Spear Street has been added to the CIP. Just today. You can go online and check it out.
And I believe Bob actually had a lengthy conversation with Erica Quallen following your budget hearing about that. So I believe he is very well aware
Oh.
of what's in the updated CIP.
Oh, good.
that
Oh, okay.
It's officially been shared with the council at this point.
Okay,
So is
We're the
that
last
at
to know.
repaving time, they would widen it and then
We can't hear
stripe
you,
it
Bob.
accordingly?
It is restriping the street. There is no more construction that will be happening in the current plan.
So we have the asphalt we need paint.
Okay, just, it would be narrowing the lanes. Okay, got it, thanks.
Bob, did you want to make a comment?
We can't
No,
hear you.
we can't hear you.
Yeah.
said no. he
Well,
didn't
if you're
wanna go
happy
forward.
and you know it, you can just clap your hands.
All right, thumbs up works.
We can tell you that you're happy. Great. Made us New Year. Okay. So item 10, the regulating heating systems in existing residential and commercial properties.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
So this was a council request. You had the conversation about the charter change to enable this to happen, as well as the ability to tax or impose a fee if it didn't. We understand that there may be some interest in exploring just the regulating it within existing buildings side of things. So before staff spends time on that, we wanted direction from the full council that that is something you wanted us to explore legally and in ordinance. So we have nothing prepared. It was really for you all to have a discussion and provide us direction. And Colin is here and Paul is here.
Oh, come on down. No.
So he has done no legal research on it.
Oh, then we want to know everything he knows. No, so I guess the question, we had the discussion and we voted on that charter change. We were asking sort of like that proposal was kind of in two parts. One, did we, and you gave a response, the question was, did we have the ability to regulate heating systems in existing buildings? And then on top of that, there was a second part, then levy any kind of a charge on top of it. And you gave the impression you thought that we had statutory right to do that. But you haven't done any research yet.
That's correct.
Okay. So that's the question is, would we like him to go do that research to see if, and the model in my mind, which might not be the model in everybody else's mind, is that at some point down the road, when somebody's heating system needs to be replaced and it happens to be running on fossil fuels, did the city want to inject its permitting process into that to help them make a better decision about how to replace it, either through regulation or not, whatever it is? Is that what we're thinking about here?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to clarify that. So I would like to have that research
I
done.
would too.
Yep.
Is that enough direction? Yeah.
Majority of you. Yep, that's enough. Thank you.
Okay,
Wow, we got
Thank-
through that fast.
thank you.
We had a
Thank
whole
you.
half an hour to go for
Well,
that.
let's talk about it some more.
No, let's not. Let's move on. We got first day of school tomorrow.
Okay, so then, oh, this is a biggie. Discuss the ARPA allocation next steps.
So we had, after your November, or at your November 30th special council meeting where you heard from the committees, we had talked about some kind of scoring matrix, how you would like to make a decision. We have a lot of requests, and we have still a lot of money, but not a whole lot of money.
Were we supposed to mark this up? Because I did.
So
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, I marked mine up too, but then I couldn't print it off.
Oh,
So,
I just did it by hand.
well, I couldn't print this.
Oh, I see.
You know, I did it on my
Oh, you did
computer
earlier.
and then I
You
couldn't
did
print
your
it off
homework
either.
well,
I sent mine to.
I know you all jumped to it. You were I actually didn't intend for you to do it for this meeting, but good job.
Well, I mean, but I did it, and I did have some questions. It's a kind of hard
It's hard.
because there's lots of things that is like, for every single one of them, I would give it a 5 to leverage other funding. I mean, I don't know if funding's there, but I think that is really crucial to see, you know, if there's other funding to help fund, you know, any of this,
Yeah, a
right?
a ranking, a matrix where you're going one through, rather than just giving a number might be, I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's where I got to, you know, everything that I liked had, you know, 14 points
Right.
when I totaled it up over to the right.
Well-
And that isn't necessarily the help we need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way I did it was I looked at the number 3 on the budget, the proposed budget from the staff, and I did the math. Dell wants to install stuff, and to do, you know, all of the hiring as well as getting a consultant to implement our climate action plan, and where we don't fully fund it, I got to $1.98 million. So just to keep that in mind. So that, I didn't think that you all were going to agree with me. So I put down some numbers in the other categories, but I didn't put a lot because I really think that the strength of this third budget proposal is that it has been reviewed by staff. They have experience in terms of how many staff members we need in order to implement several things that could fall into many of these buckets. Definitely leveraging other funding, definitely meeting urgent health and economic needs, short-term investment leading to lasting benefits, and is transformative. So it was a 5 straight across the board for that. But then I looked.
Which thing are you on?
Oh, well,
Energy?
no, I was just adding what they had on page 13 in the budget book.
She's talking about the
number
proposal staff put
3.
together to implement
Yes,
the climate
okay.
action plan.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, not page 13, page 14 in the budget book, that I priced it out
Yeah.
to see how many ARPA dollars. And since we all agreed to 5.75, that means that the $406,150 for fiscal year 24 we have to pay out of ARPA dollars. But I then broke down the $737,917 and the $503,575 in fiscal year 25 and 26 to 80% and 60%. And,
Oh, I see.
and then I even did the $335,717 for fiscal year 27 through December 2026. And I followed the same kind of breakdown as we did for the 3 city staff, where they did, 80%, 60%, 40% phasing down. I couldn't get to the 20%, but I did get to 40%, and that all added up to $1.98 million. So that left for me to play around with the numbers. I then did. Yes, we could certainly, I think, respond to residents' needs and the needs for health and short-term investment for lasting benefits for the dog waste bag dispensers and the feral dog park improvements. Do we need $70,000 at Feral Park? That I wanted us to discuss. I'm not sure. And I also thought that the bike path, now there I'm going over the $2.006 million, but the $100,000 to $200,000 to leverage the $1.145 million for the 5-foot shared use path into a 10-foot shared use path along Heinsberg Road. That was something that I would be, I saw the value of. And then I also looked at the Natural Resources and Conservation Committee, the $50,000 compared to the $400,000 where we take down trees and replant. That seems very reasonable. And then the open space plan is needed. And I think that
like
all
the
these
book ban,
things,
too.
and all these things that the Energy Committee and the NRCC, but specifically the Energy Committee and the Planning Commission, we're talking about. But I even think economic development, because the more we spend today on climate mitigation, the less we will be spending down the road by millions and millions, if not more dollars. I really think it satisfies a lot of the line item requests. I was also looking at the art to have a cultural plan, because I think that is transformative for a city. And just like the firefighters want to have new paint on their walls, there is something, pride of place, that, a splash of color and a little bit of aesthetics can do. With regard to the complete housing needs and opportunities assessment, I'm wondering what the CCRPC's role would be in that, because I think they've done a lot with building homes together in terms of what we need. We need workforce housing. We need homes for those entry-level positions in our local jobs. Support childcare. I'm not sure what direction we can go. If we were having, us all come around indoor recreation center, I'd say, great, we can do something for childcare there, right? But we aren't. So we don't have any city buildings that we could dedicate to that. I don't know what our role, but I'd certainly love to have Sandy Dooley look into it and tell us. And that could be potentially something the
Well,
state's going to take up too.
Somewhere in this list, I thought we had carved out $1 million for childcare. Did we not? We just talked about
We
it.
just talked about it.
Okay.
Yeah, we wanted to know more about it.
Well, I do think that's a really important piece, but I don't know what the dollar figure is, and I don't know what the action is. And I think exploring that more would be really helpful.
Yep.
And that's where you might find some matching funds.
Point of clarification. So as I read the memo, Councilor Emery, that was very useful going down the list, but I feel like the manager was setting up today just to ask that type of question that the chair just articulated. So are you looking for us tonight what additional information we're going to need, or how this process we want it to unfold to evaluate these options? And I think I would echo what the chair just suggested, which that ambiguous childcare thing, it'd be useful to have some idea or suggestion as to where that money could more tactically be applied, because I didn't see that in any of the presentations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I think the state's going to be talking about it, is what I heard.
Certainly the case.
And I would.
Right, so I don't know if we need to put a dollar figure on everything. We just can't spend all of it and say, in the future, we'll use ARPA money for this, because we've already committed it.
Yeah. So to Councilor Chinden, what I was trying to give you tonight was a tool that you could use to make your decisions moving forward. I thought the conversation was going to be a conversation about the tool. Is this the right tool? Are we going in the right direction? Are there areas where you want us to explore more? And on what timeline do you want us to come back to you? So, the committees provide this feedback. We've been in budget season. We want trying to lay out a plan for what happens next. That was what I envisioned how I envisioned we would talk about tonight, but certainly happy to take it in whatever direction you all want to go.
Well, I just want to point out that you did provide the required new staff work and support and process. And I think that's a really key column. Most of them were yes. So that's where I went back then to look at your climate action plan. How do we implement it? Because a lot of these things do fall into the climate action plan. Just going back to what the staff recommended in terms of the staffing.
Yep.
Well, I guess my feeling also is that we don't need to allocate ARPA money in the next month or two. I think we can provide some direction to Jesse and the staff to get back with us to come up with some ideas about childcare. I'm hoping the legislature makes some decisions about funding for some of these topics, which would also give us a clue into maybe some additional funds to support, or framework to support. Childcare is huge.
Mm-hmm.
No one's really imagining that a community is going to, create a childcare center, I don't think, unless we're just given a church, like, was it Harrisburg? I think they just were given a church. And one of the things the community is thinking about is, can that be a childcare center?
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. But we're not suggesting that we have an empty building somewhere
Right.
that we could get into that business.
May I just ask one question?
Sure.
Michael need to go, so is this camera on?
Oh, and then Michael will be next, yeah.
Yeah, we do have
Michael,
empty.
we had called on Cindy, just a minute.
Oh, sorry.
Is your green light green?
Oh, there. Okay. It's so bright. Um, is it possible at all to, I like your idea of some of the salary money, the ARPA funds going to that. Is it possible, because when you spoke about the budget, you had like a little over 5% for the fire department and the police department as well. And then you have 2.5 for the climate change action plan. What is that figure, the 2 point, what figure is that figure amount for the climate change?
0.13%.
And what is that going to? What does that go to?
So as do you want me to respond?
Sure.
As presented in the FY24 budget, it's about 2.5% tax rate, 2.5% increase in the tax rate, a little under that, a penny on the tax rate, and it funds 2 new positions and consulting money. It's in the city manager's budget presentation, and I think that's what Councilor Emery was suggesting, is use a lot of the balance of the ARPA funds to implement that climate action plan implementation plan from the staff over the years between now and 2026.
And what they're proposing, you're asking what is it for? One is for a climate director. One is staff, sustainability community engagement manager and analysts, some consultants, public outreach funding to meetings so we can have those conversations with the public about what's important, and that was the first year, and then there's an enforcement team in the second and third year if things are approved that are requirements, and then there's an enforcement. So that's kind of the staffing that the city. Okay, thank you. Michael, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, actually, I sent it in the chat, but Megan mentioned that there are no buildings available for a childcare facility.
I said that.
Or you said that, but there probably are vacant buildings. I think one is quite close to you. It's the former Sears Automotive building. It's been vacant for a long, long time. And maybe some of those funds can be used to fit out part of that building as a childcare center. There are places where we could perhaps satisfy that need.
I wouldn't argue with that. We don't own that building, but we certainly, if we have a thoughtful committee or group that comes together to explore options and come back to the council with, this is what we've identified and this is where we think you could, fund it or create it, and these are the partners we would need, like that would require the mall, I guess, or Sears. I don't know who owns it, but
Sears.
To partner with us, that could be one of the solutions. But we don't have that data right now, so I think we have to develop that kind of creative thinking.
Yes, Sears is not using it, and they're paying taxes.
Sure.
They might be interested in letting you have it for $1 a year.
It's owned by the trustees. So.
Well, just beware. Then the time that they decide to sell it, you're putting a lot of families.
Yep. Obviously, you'd have to tie things up a little, and I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So can I repeat back what I think I'm hearing?
Yeah.
So I think what I'm hearing is maybe the tool works for some of you, and maybe you guys will spend a little more time with it. That we will, as staff, also think more specifically about what childcare, an investment in childcare could look like, and what some options are, and that in the next couple of months we will also really, or I guess this is a question to you. I would like you to say to us, go explore how we can leverage these funds. Mm-hmm. So look at the climate. Sorry for the no pun intended, the climate for grant programs or other federal funds that are coming down. And if we see unique opportunities to say, okay, with this little ARPA money, we could leverage this other bucket, to be mindful of those. So childcare, leveraging funds, a CAP multi-year implementation plan, and any other work you all want to do on the tool. That's what I'm kind of hearing as next steps coming out of this meeting. And take it up end of maybe either in February or March.
Can I also ask you? Can I also ask you if I think that you heard correctly, and I think that makes sense. But I also want to be sensitive to your current staffing and lack of certain, positions. So, would it make sense in terms of a more immediate use of a small amount of the ARPA money to fund a consultant or a person that could really do that kind of exploration?
For childcare? Is that
No, for all of the, like all the grant funding and stuff. I mean, I know the League of Cities and Towns has a person, but she's not going to work full time for South Burlington. And this is a big ask.
Mhm.
So I guess I just put that out there. If we really want to have back the maximizing the money
Leveraging.
that we could leverage, then I think we really need someone focused on that who has some skill in that.
But be careful, because if you add more bureaucracy on top of it, we
Yeah.
pay for bureaucracy and don't spend the money on stuff.
I would rather
just
spend
keep that
money
balance, you
on
gotta-
something we know we want, which is implementing the climate action plan, than do exploratory on what is this, like 30 lines of possibilities. Yeah, I since we have finite amount of money, I would really,
Well, we already just approved 20,000 for
trees.
trees that, I mean, I'm sure to sort of discount the other 30 lines and just look at the climate action plan.
So
No, she wasn't discounting. She was looking into childcare. I mean, that's what I wanted to actually go through, Tom, was the questions I have for the ADU, so the dwelling unit, what is the A? Accessory dwelling unit. I think we really need to address STRs. I'm contacted every other week about people concerned about properties in their neighborhood turning into Airbnbs, and which is housing out of our out of our stock, and especially in my neighborhood, that's an important neighborhood. And I think that the other question I had, the 5 bus shelters, a lot of that would be on private land, because the shelters, that would be a lot of discussion. So that's the question I have with regard to the bus shelters, which I also
Aren't
thought
they
was
on
of
the right of
interest.
way, the city right of way?
Well, the city right away,
It's like
there's a
15 feet
sidewalk,
in.
yeah, but, okay, but I don't know. I mean, there are front yards in my neighborhood, so, I mean, if you really want a bus shelter on White Street, where you're gonna be in someone's front yard, the person might have something to say about that. That's just a question I thought we should inquire about. And then the other question, nope, I think those were my questions.
Well, what does the council as a whole want staff to do?
I want to do my homework.
yeah.
You want to do your homework?
Yeah,
Okay.
I did do
You
my
wanna
homework.
fill out the.
So in order to do your homework, do you want to identify like the top things that you are interested in exploring? I mean, if it is the climate action plan, that's one big thing. If it's childcare, great. And then, if you're really into doing something about Farrell Park, that might be, your
Well, they're ones that are hard numbers, right? Where we could say, this is my list of hard number ones I'd like to fund, and these are the ones that don't really have numbers, but they're concepts that I want to fund, right? And we could prioritize them that way, and then we could just argue about it for a little
All
while.
right, so why don't we prioritize and then we can argue, because we will, because if you like, Megan's plan, it uses all the money to do almost all the money to do the climate action plan over, not knowing what we can leverage. So that's the other part.
Right. Well, it was just a suggestion.
Yeah.
That's what she's going to
So I'll make a suggestion, picking up on the arguing piece as well as the timeline. I think it was announced on WVMT that Councilor Coda is also not running for re-election, nor am I. So there will be 2 new councilors after March. So I'm all for arguing. You know, that's what this is all about. But I do see a lot of value and merit for having that arguing after March 7th, because I think the 2 new councilors are going to be the ones that you're going to want the buy-in for wherever you're putting this money towards. So happy to do the arguing in January and February, but I also think it's useful to just put on the table that there'll be 2 new bodies around this table, and then that might be more useful time to get the buy-in for wherever you guys want to put this money.
I don't disagree. I mean, I don't think we're going to be arguing this before town meeting. We might get some information.
But we want to get as much work out of these guys before they leave, too. We want to squeeze the last drop.
I know.
I hope that you had already disclosed that, Councilor Code. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, I am. You did not break news.
So I think the task, I think I may have over-processed you all here. One of the things you talked about at the last meeting was sending Helen your top 3 to 5 priorities for us to explore. And then I gave you a whole different matrix that's much more complicated. So I think what, kind of going back to some of the conversations, I think if you want to do your homework and spend time with this tool and that helps whoever is going to be the deciders here make some decisions, I think that's fabulous. I think we will explore some childcare options. I think we will pay attention in the next couple of months to other funding sources and what we can leverage into some of the ideas we've heard you talking about, because that might change your criteria too, if we can leverage in $1 million for 20,000 versus something else. And start collecting all of that information in the next couple of months, prepared to have a more robust conversation about this probably in, quite frankly, in April.
Yeah. Actually, I combined Helen's and yours.
Yeah, you did.
Right, yeah. I think that sounds reasonable.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to take a 5-minute break?
Yes.
All right, we'll take a 5-minute break. But don't leave, Tom. I would like to call back to order the South Burlington City Council meeting of Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023. We are on item 12, excuse me. That's right. 12, to discuss and approve the annual city manager's evaluation process and potential contract renewal. So, Jesse.
Thank you. So I provided the council a memo and a set of tools. As you all know, in my contract, there's a section about annual performance reviews. We did that last year at this time. To me, it's really useful to do that in January and February with a council that's worked with me for a year, and then set goals in the next year with the policies and strategies and with the evaluation process. So I've outlined a proposed timeline. I'm also respectfully requesting that, and I talked to those of you who I negotiated my contract with the first time, that I would like in conjunction with this contract to renegotiate my contract, in conjunction with this evaluation to renegotiate my contract. I will be less than a year remaining on my contract starting FY24, and I always like to roll it so I never get less than a year. It's a 3-year, yep. So my 3rd year will start in FY24. I'm not looking for any changes in FY24, but I love this job and I love this team, and I would like to stick around for a little while and have some certainty about that. So I've outlined a process and a timeline for this. I sent you some tools that are pretty much exactly the same as the tools we used that last time. Happy to adjust those any way the council sees fit. Mike and the IT director and I have also worked on an improved
Yes.
survey tool.
All
So we can
right,
put the
those
information
lines.
in
Recall, that
differently and have it spit out more clearly.
Nice.
The one change I am suggesting, based on what I recall from our conversation last year, is to add a key stakeholder evaluation. So last year we did, the leadership team provided feedback and the council provided feedback. There was some conversation about did you all want to solicit feedback from key stakeholders? So I have proposed an evaluation tool for that that's very similar to the leadership team one. In that, my thought was somebody from union leadership. We do a lot of work with our unions. Somebody from the South Burlington Land Trust, from the South Burlington Business Association, the school superintendent, and some committee members. But obviously, that's for you all to discuss. So the timeline I suggested is that if you give some approval to this tonight, we'll send out those tools by the 9th. Results would be due back by the 25th and shared with all of us on the 2nd. We would review those on February 6th, and then we'd spend 2 weeks negotiating contract renewal for approval on February 16th. That is my proposal.
Comments. The only comment I like all that you included and added. The only piece, and I've mentioned this to Jesse, and I think I mentioned it last time and we excluded it. On the form that we fill out, there's a whole section on supervision.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel particularly comfortable or able to evaluate her supervision skills with the staff, because I don't see it, with the exception of when the staff is here and during our council meetings. But, you know, we don't traipse around the office and see her, you know, yelling at someone or having a good conversation with them or whatever. So I think we should, unless you all feel like you could address the questions under supervision, I think we can just eliminate it. We did last time. Yeah, doing it. But
So my friendly amendment to that is that quite honestly feels a little awkward for me, because my supervision or support of the team is probably 60 or 70% of how I spend my time. But I think you get the same. I think you get feedback on that through the leadership team comments. So I would recommend you take this question off and instead have a placeholder saying this will be evaluated under the leadership team comments as provided. So it's still a category you're evaluating me on, but
yes.
Not in this way.
Well, I have seen you, Jesse, for the second and the third, and even the fifth. You know, I've seen you in the meetings that I attend as a council liaison with staff leaders, and I've seen you also, you know, through the events that the city has put on and how you have, you know, I think affirmed your leadership when an event has happened. And I think we do get insights in terms of instills confidence. I think that when we receive the presentations on the budgets, I think that is also, we can sense that there's, you know, kind of the energy, you know, we can take a temperature of the room and see how you and your leadership are getting on together. So I feel like I can do at least 2, 3, and 5.
Okay. Well, then leave it on. That's fine.
Yeah.
And if anyone doesn't feel like they can evaluate one of the questions, then you can put an NA.
Okay.
And you'll put the whole thing on SurveyMonkey?
And you put what?
But you'll put the whole thing on SurveyMonkey, so,
Yes.
okay, right. Is
Well,
the-
I'm not going to.
Well,
Someone's going to
Mike-
do
Mike-
it for
Mike
me, and
is.
hopefully
Yes.
it'll work this time.
How long would does that generally take for somebody to set that up? Is it pretty
We
quick?
have a phenomenal IT director. He's already mocked up this one for me just
Okay.
to test out the form to see if
Okay.
it would work.
Good.
He did it in probably 20 minutes.
Wow.
It's cutting and pasting.
Yeah,
It's-
yeah. Okay.
The problem was I can never get into it, but I'll work with him and maybe
Yeah,
I
he
can
can do
get
it.
into it rather than have to come here and sit somewhere.
He has, not to brag too much on the team, which I know I love to do. He's got such a you all haven't interacted with Mike Mott a whole lot, but he's just got such a core of ethics about, looking at these kinds of survey results and making the comparison to he has access to every single document, every personnel file, every payroll file, every health insurance file in the city, and he just has such a core of ethics of IT doesn't work if it's not trusted. So I have the utmost faith in him to do whatever he needs to do with you to
Okay.
make it happen.
Great. Well, good. So we'll look for that. I'll ask you to fill that out ASAP once you get it, and then I would love to have some people volunteer to work on the contract negotiations.
Obviously, not two people here.
No, they have to do it before
But
they
they-
leave.
They have
That's
to
what-
do it
oh,
before they
By the end of
leave.
Would they be
February.
working on the
I think
contract
maybe you are
negotiation
saying
too?
just
or is
the
that,
two of
Yeah,
is that,
the
is that all by
contract
February?
is,
Oh, it's by February. Excellent.
February.
Excellent. So they still have to do some work.
Yeah, they
Yes,
still
very
can.
good.
Whatever you want, they're saying. No.
Good.
I'm gonna give her everything she wants.
You
Oh,
just got yourself
oh.
out of a job. And if others have other feedback on stakeholders you would like me to send or you would like Mike to send the evaluation to, please just let me know.
I think that's a good list. I'm trying to think if there's any sort of other people involved in the city that don't have aren't on SBBA or,
For a community member?
yeah. But I can't think of, Mr. or Mrs. Community Member particularly. If we get some members from committees, that would probably be enough.
Maybe Jesse could recommend some, and we could like a list, and we could choose from that list.
That's cherry
Well, we could.
He's just kidding.
Who's ever reaching out to the community member, can you be objective? I think that's a question we can ask. It's not like you ask your niece, right? Or something like that.
Okay. Well, if
That's a
anyone
recommendation.
has some names, you can get them to Jesse or me, if you can think of someone.
Well, I know that there are people in my neighborhood with regard to the encampment that probably have been in touch with Jesse, so I could probably suggest a few names.
Probably pretty bad at me.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, well. It got handled, though.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
maybe.
Okay,
the
well,
bark
think
is
about
worse than
that.
the bite.
We've got a little bit of time for that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, item 13, is there any other business?
Any news on the ARPA funds for the wastewater treatment plant grant request? It was December 29th, the deadline for the communities of limited means to have their, not yet.
You
I'm
mean
guessing.
what was submitted to the state from those communities?
Yeah.
To
if
say
they've
you're in
made
the
a grant.
running, are we in the running?
Or-
Oh, we are definitely not in the running for those.
Oh.
We are not a community of limited means. So the what Tom was outlining in that comment was the state opened up that grant opportunity first to communities of limited means, and then what funds remain will be offered to the rest of the communities. So we don't know yet what the state took in and how many dollars are remaining for us to apply for. But he's on all of those. He's already fed our project to the grantors to demonstrate a shovel-ready project. So if there are funds left over, which we assume there will be, we are in line.
Okay,
Good, okay.
thanks.
All right. So if there's no other business besides that, item 14, consider a possible executive session.
So yes, I'd like to move the council make a specific finding that premature general public knowledge of a discussion of pending civil litigation to which the city is a party and discussion of the appointment, employment, or evaluation of a city employee would clearly place this public body at a substantial disadvantage.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye. And I now move that the board enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing pending civil litigation to which the city is a party and the appointment, employment, or evaluation of a city employee, inviting Jesse Baker, Colin McNeil, Amanda Lafferty, and Paul Connor into session with council.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And we will not make any decisions or be coming back to this meeting, so this meeting is adjourned.
Happy New Year, Sue.
Everybody, yeah. All righty, thank you.